Every year, thousands of people go missing. Most are found within days, confused, scared, or unharmed. But sometimes, when a missing person does come back, the people closest to them swear that something about them has changed. They look the same. They sound the same. But deep down, you know it's not them anymore. These are true stories from people who went missing, and came back different. Story 1. He didn't remember going missing. My name's Aaron, and a few years ago, I went through something that I still can't explain, and neither can anyone else who knows me. It started on a cold November evening in 2018. I was living in a small town in Pennsylvania called Wellsboro, working at an auto shop just outside of town. I was 26 back then, not really the type to believe in paranormal stuff or whatever. But what happened to me changed everything I thought I knew about what's real. It was a Thursday. I left work a little after 6 p.m., said goodnight to my boss, and started my usual 10-minute drive home through the back roads. I remember the exact route, because it's burned into my memory: the old pine forest on both sides of the road, the rusty for sale sign on the abandoned diner, and that one-lane bridge over the creek. According to my coworkers, I never made it home. My car was found the next morning, parked halfway across that bridge, engine off, keys still in the ignition. My phone was sitting in the passenger seat. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. My parents filed a missing persons report that night, and for the next 5 days, police, volunteers, and even local hunters searched every inch of that forest. They found nothing. Then, on the 6th day, I walked out of the woods. Apparently, I was found by a retired park ranger who lived about 6 miles from the bridge. I was barefoot, clothes torn up, but I wasn't injured, no scratches, no cuts. He said I'd just appeared out of the trees and stared at him like I didn't recognize where I was. When the police brought me to the hospital, I kept asking what day it was. They told me it was Wednesday, almost a week later. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But when they showed me my parents crying in the hallway, I realized it wasn't. Here's where things get weird. I didn't remember being gone. Not a single second of it. It was like one moment I was driving home, and the next I was standing in the woods, looking at a stranger pointing a flashlight in my face. The doctors ran all the tests, drug screens, neurological exams, even MRI scans. Nothing. No head trauma, no toxins. Physically, I was fine. But that night in the hospital, while I was trying to sleep, I started noticing small things that felt off. For one, my reflection. I know it sounds crazy, but when I looked in the mirror, something about my eyes seemed wrong. Not color or shape, just expression. Like the person staring back wasn't matching me. Then there were my dreams. Every night for weeks, I had this recurring nightmare. I was back on that bridge, headlights cutting through fog, and I could see a figure standing in the middle of the road, tall, motionless. I couldn't make out its face. Every time I got closer, I'd wake up gasping. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. and found mud on the floor near my bed. My shoes were still by the door. I don't sleepwalk, or at least I never did before that. My mom told me that, for weeks after I came back, I would sometimes just stop mid-conversation and stare out the window, like I was listening for something. I don't remember doing that, but she swears I did. Then one morning, while shaving, I noticed something behind my left ear. A small scar, thin, almost surgical. I had never seen it before, and neither had my doctor. It's been years since then, and I still don't remember those 6 days. But sometimes, when I drive home at night, I catch glimpses of something in the trees. Just a shape, like someone standing too still. My girlfriend says it's just paranoia. But deep down, I know that whoever, or whatever, found me out there, didn't want to let go. This next story was sent in by someone who went missing for 2 hours, but what happened during that time left them permanently afraid of mirrors. Story 2, I was only gone for 2 hours. My name's Claire. I live in northern Michigan, near Traverse City, where winters are long and silent and the woods stretch for miles behind every neighborhood. The story I'm about to tell happened 3 years ago, but the fear still feels fresh every time I think about it. It wasn't a dramatic disappearance, not like in the movies. I was only missing for a couple of hours. But what happened in that time changed something inside me. It was late February, freezing cold, the kind of night where the air hurts your skin. My boyfriend, Tyler, had fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie, so I decided to take a short walk before bed. I do that sometimes when I can't sleep, just walk down our quiet street and back, maybe to clear my head. I remember checking the time before leaving, 12:47 a.m. I slipped on my boots, grabbed my phone, and told myself I'd be back in 10 minutes. The snow had that crunching sound under my feet, and the streetlights gave everything this faint yellow glow. The neighborhood was dead silent. About 3 blocks down, there's a path that leads into a small wooded area behind a playground. It's not big, maybe a few acres, but I'd walked through it 100 times before. That night, for some reason, I decided to take that path. I don't know why. The woods were darker than usual, and the air felt heavier. After a few minutes, I started feeling uneasy, like someone was behind me. I turned around several times but saw nothing, just snow and trees. Then I heard it, footsteps, matching my pace. I froze. The sound stopped too. I called out, thinking maybe it was a deer, or someone walking their dog. Nothing. Just silence. Then, from deeper in the woods, I heard a faint sound. It was someone whispering my name. It wasn't a shout, it was almost gentle, like a voice right next to my ear. Claire. I remember my whole body tightening. I turned toward the sound and used my phone's flashlight, scanning through the trees. The beam hit something, a figure, standing perfectly still. It was a man. At least, I think it was. The light hit his clothes, but his face looked wrong, blurred somehow, like my eyes couldn't focus on it. He wasn't moving, just standing there, tilted slightly forward. I backed away, whispering Tyler, even though I knew it wasn't him. And then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting on my front porch. My phone was still in my hand. The time said 2:53 a.m. I ran inside, panicked, and woke Tyler up. He looked confused and scared, said he'd been calling my phone for an hour. There were 12 missed calls from him, and a few from my mom. Here's the strange part, my boots weren't wet. There was no snow on them. And when Tyler stepped outside to check, there were no footprints in the snow, none leading up to the porch. The next day, I tried to convince myself I'd just blacked out, maybe from low blood sugar or something. But that night, I noticed something that still makes my stomach turn. When I passed the hallway mirror, I saw myself, but just for a split second, my reflection didn't move. It just stood there, smiling faintly, even as I turned my head. Since then, I've covered almost every mirror in my house. I only leave one uncovered, the bathroom one, because I need it to get ready for work. But I never look into it for more than a few seconds at a time. Every once in a while, when I'm brushing my teeth, I see condensation forming on the glass, like a breath that isn't mine. People say you can't just lose 2 hours without some explanation. But if that's true, then tell me, why do I sometimes wake up with dirt under my fingernails, or find pine needles on my pillow? Whatever happened in those woods didn't end that night. It just followed me home. This next story was submitted by someone whose brother disappeared for 3 days, but when he came back, the family swore it wasn't really him. Story 3, My brother wasn't the same. My name is Jake, and this story is about my brother, Evan. We grew up in a small town in Montana called Hamilton, surrounded by pine-covered mountains and endless trails. We were close, only a year apart, always out hiking, camping, or getting into stupid trouble. But after what happened in the summer of 2015, I don't think I ever really got my brother back. It was July, one of those long summer days when the sun barely sets before 10. Evan had just turned 19, and he'd started hanging out with some guys who liked going off into the woods at night hikes, they called them. I never joined, because I've lived around those woods my whole life and I know how easy it is to get lost. One Friday night, Evan told me he and his friends were going to hike up near the old fire tower, about 6 miles from town. I remember joking with him about getting eaten by a bear. He just laughed, said he'd be back by morning. He didn't come back. When his friends returned around midnight, they said they lost track of him sometime after sunset. They'd split up briefly, and when they met back at the clearing, Evan was gone. At first, we weren't worried. Evan was outdoorsy, smart, the kind of guy who could find his way home in the dark. But when morning came and there was still no sign of him, we called the sheriff. Search and rescue came out the next day. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, they covered the whole mountain. Nothing. He was missing for 3 days. Then, early on the 4th morning, a hunter radioed in that he'd found someone wandering near a river about 8 miles north of the tower. It was Evan. When my dad and I went to pick him up at the ranger station, I remember freezing the second I saw him. He looked fine physically, no injuries, no bruises, but his face was different. His skin was pale, like he'd been out of the sun for weeks. And his eyes, they just looked empty. Like someone had dimmed the light behind them. He didn't remember much, at least that's what he said. Claimed he'd gotten separated and blacked out. But when we asked where he'd slept, or what he ate, or how he stayed warm, he just stared at the wall. For weeks after that, he barely spoke. He would sit in his room with the lights off, sometimes humming to himself, an off-key, tuneless sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. One night, I woke up to a noise coming from the kitchen. When I went to check, Evan was standing there barefoot, staring out the back window into the woods. He didn't even turn when I asked what he was doing. He just said, quietly, "They're not done with me yet." That was the first time he'd spoken in days. After that, strange things started happening around the house. The dog refused to go near Evan's room. My mom said she heard whispering coming from inside it when nobody was there. One morning, I walked past his door and saw him sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing symbols in chalk, circles, lines, things that looked like maps but weren't. When I asked him what it was, he said, "A way back." 2 weeks later, I woke up and his bed was empty again. His window was open. We found him the next afternoon, sitting at the base of the same mountain where he disappeared. His clothes were clean, his face blank. When the sheriff asked him what he was doing there, he said, "I thought I heard them calling me." It's been almost 10 years since that summer. Evan's alive, living with our parents, but he's different. He speaks less and less. Sometimes, in the middle of dinner, he'll just stop and look toward the tree line, like he's waiting for something. Last Christmas, I helped my mom decorate the house. When I went to hang a wreath on Evan's door, I noticed something carved into the wood, a perfect circle with 3 vertical lines through it. I asked him what it meant. He smiled faintly and said, "It's where I went." When I pressed him for more, he just whispered, "And one day, I'll have to go back." This next story was sent in by a man whose wife went missing during a hike in Arizona, and when she was found, she wasn't the same person who left that morning. Story 4, she came back. But it wasn't her. My name's Michael, and this story is about my wife, Leah. We've been married for almost 9 years now, but if I'm being honest, I don't know who I'm living with anymore. Leah and I met in college, both outdoor types, hikers, campers, always chasing the next national park trip. We moved to Arizona right after getting married, mostly for the weather and the scenery. She loved it here, the red rocks, the desert air, the endless trails. That's what makes this story even harder to believe. It happened in October of 2020. We'd gone to hike near Cathedral Rock in Sedona, one of our favorite spots. It was a clear afternoon, barely any wind, and Leah wanted to explore one of the lesser-known trails she'd found on an old hiking forum. I wasn't thrilled. I like sticking to marked routes, but she insisted it wasn't far, just a mile or so off the main path. Around 4 p.m., we reached a narrow canyon where the sunlight barely touched the ground. It was quiet, not peaceful quiet, but that heavy kind that makes you realize how far from civilization you really are. At one point, I stopped to tie my boot. When I looked up again, Leah wasn't there. I called her name, no response. At first, I figured she'd just gone ahead, so I walked faster, following the trail. But the path split into 3 directions, and that's when panic started creeping in. I shouted louder. My voice echoed, but no answer. I ran for nearly 20 minutes before I realized I was completely alone. By the time I made it back to the car, the sun was setting. I called 911. Within an hour, there were rangers and volunteers out searching. They kept going all night, but there was no trace of her, not a single footprint, not even a dropped item. Leah was gone. I barely remember the next 2 days. I stayed near the trailhead, refused to leave the site. On the 3rd morning, just before sunrise, one of the rangers came to my tent. They'd found her. According to them, a woman matching Leah's description had been spotted walking barefoot along a dirt road about 6 miles from where she disappeared. When they reached her, she was just standing there, staring at the horizon. She wasn't injured, not dehydrated, nothing. Just blank. When I saw her at the ranger station, my heart jumped. It was Leah, but at the same time, it wasn't. She looked right through me when I hugged her, like I was a stranger. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, and she smelled like earth and metal, like rain hitting rust. The first thing she said wasn't "Where am I?" or "What happened?" She said, "I found it." When I asked what she meant, she just smiled faintly and shook her head. For weeks after that, she barely slept. I'd wake up to find her standing by the window, whispering to herself. Sometimes she'd go outside at night and just walk into the desert barefoot. When I tried to stop her, she'd look at me with this distant, almost offended expression, like I was interrupting something sacred. The weirdest part came a month later. We were eating breakfast, and I noticed she was stirring her coffee in slow circles, counterclockwise, over and over. I made a joke about it, and she stopped suddenly, staring at me like I'd said something in another language. Then she asked, "When did you start calling me Leah?" I laughed, confused, but she wasn't joking. She looked serious, hurt, even. I said, "That's your name." And she whispered, "It wasn't before." That same night, I woke up to a faint humming sound coming from the living room. When I got up to check, Leah was kneeling on the floor, drawing patterns in the dust with her fingertip, spirals, lines, and something that looked like a circle with 3 slashes through it. When she saw me watching, she smiled and said, "It's where I went." My blood went cold, because that was the same phrase a man online had mentioned in a thread about his missing brother years ago. He described the exact same symbol. Since then, I've tried to convince her to get help, but she refuses. She just says she's more awake now. Sometimes I catch her standing at the back door, staring at the desert. And once, I swear this is true, I saw footprints leading away from the house into the sand. Small, barefoot prints, that just stopped halfway, like whoever made them vanished mid-step. The last time she spoke about it was a few weeks ago. We were sitting outside at dusk, and I asked her what she saw out there. She said, "It's not a place. It's an opening. Once you see it, you can't unsee it." Then she looked at me and added, "And they'll call for you too, when it's time." I don't know who she is anymore. But every night, when the wind hits the windows just right, I swear I can hear whispering from the desert. And sometimes, Leah whispers back. Sometimes, people come back from being lost, but not everyone comes back whole. These stories remind us that there are places out there that can take more than your body. They can take a piece of you, and give something else in return. If you've ever had a strange disappearance, blackout, or unexplainable experience, feel free to share it in the comments.